Hey folks, today's show is brought to you by Fanly, the sports app that keeps you plugged into your favorite teams. Get news and highlights and tweets all in one place without getting a bunch of stuff you don't want. Fanly is fast, sleek, and cool. I use it for iPhone, but it's also available for Android. Fanly is the easiest way to check in on all your teams with stories from over 2,000 top sources, updated daily. Download it now, Fanly. That's Fanly. And now let's get to the show.
It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
All right. Let's do this. Love the song, love the Apex Manor. I'm Chris Harris. This is the Harris Football Podcast. Thanks for being here. Hope you're having a good workout or a good drive, or you're listening to this at work and maybe it's making your day a little less not great. I wanted to let you know that we're having a contest to win a Skype call with me before your fantasy draft. Go to our fan page on Facebook. Just search on Facebook for Harris Football Fan Page, or you can look at my Twitter feed at Harris Football, and I'll link to it. I also wanted to say thank you to the lawnmowers for not turning the neighborhood into the noise apocalypse. See that? It's a backhanded complaint, but it comes in the guise of gratitude. So sneaky. Stupid lawnmowers.
Today's kickoff.
On today's show, I will dive into some ranks changes I made on Monday related to injuries, discuss why briefly, then I'll kick off our topic of the day, which is lottery tickets for 2015. High upside, scary downside players you can think about grabbing if they're available in the last rounds of your fantasy draft. We'll have a great song from Summer Fiction, a one-man band who churns out pop masterpieces. Love the Summer Fiction. Of course, more nightmare fuel in the form of a voicemail and then some of your tweets and emails. And then I'm bringing on my old friend Brandon Funston of Yahoo Fantasy to get his opinion on some lottery tickets. Now, do I really play daily fantasy sports on DraftKings.com? I really do. Not advertising speak. I actually do. In my opinion, it is the best place to play and makes a fun addition to your regular fantasy squad. So why DraftKings? I feel like I have a little bit of an advantage playing there. You play 3 receivers in a flex, plus it's PPR. If you know your stuff, having an extra guy in your lineup gives you a leg up. Plus it's really easy, and they've got all kinds of contests. You've seen the Millionaire Maker TV ads, and those contests are awesome. There are other kinds of pools on DraftKings. You can do 50-50, where all you have to do is finish in the top half to double your entry fee. You can just play head-to-head against a friend. The appeal of DraftKings is it's fantasy football on demand. You can play one week, sit out another, and always pick a new team based on that week's matchups. I really do play, and if you go to DraftKings.com and use my promo code Harris, you'll get a free entry to try it out. Plus, you really will be helping the little podcast that could. And of course, you really do have a shot at winning $2 million in week 1. So go to DraftKings.com and enter promo code HARRIS, and thanks very much.
Injury news.
A few updates on my ranks. I talked at length about Jordy Nelson's torn ACL on Monday's show, and he's gone now for my redraft ranks that you can find on harrisfootball.com. You'll see Randall Cobb and Devontae Adams in the top 20 among receivers now. And then deep among my receiver ranks, you'll see Jeff Janis and Ty Montgomery. They're vying for the number 3 spot in Aaron Rodgers' aerial attack. The winner has a chance to be a fantasy factor. So deep leaguers could keep an eye on those guys. One of my flag players, Lorenzo Taliaferro, has been diagnosed with an MCL sprain. Is almost certainly out for the beginning of the regular season. Insert heavy sigh here. As you know, if you've been listening to the show, I think there could be an opportunity behind Justin Forsett because Forsett will be 30 in October. He's small, kind of a one-year wonder. But now it's worth wondering if it might be rookie Buck Allen who might take advantage in case of a 4-set downslide and not Taliaferro. I had to lower Taliaferro and raise Allen in my ranks based on the possibility that Allen could impress in September and make Taliaferro a little bit obsolete. I've got Taliaferro 49th among running backs now, while Allen is 46th. I still think one of them has a shot to be relevant, but I also don't mind if you don't want to use up a bench spot on one of them before we know which guy it is. Finally, as I've talked about Joique Bell and Amir Abdullah all throughout August, I've always started the conversation with, if Joique Bell is healthy. The supposition all along has been that Bell was resting, getting the veteran caddy treatment, and that he'd be back in time to reassert himself into a starting role. But as you may recall, I did say that there would come a point where if Bell wasn't able to practice, all bets were going to be off. And I think we've reached that point. There's nothing official with the Lions, but it's looking more and more like Bell won't even play this preseason. He still hasn't practiced. And if you listen to Monday's show, you heard Will Carroll, who knows his stuff, say that he has real concerns about Bell to start the year. That's enough for me, folks. As much as I like Bell, as much as I think Abdullah is getting way too much hype, it is time to re-rank. I lowered Bell to my number 27 running back spot, right ahead of Abdullah. And in PPR leagues, I have them flip-flopped. It's a total bummer. You know, I have spent August saying that I thought Bell was good value. I still think there's a chance he winds up having good value, but, you know, I did always have that caveat. I thought he would be practicing by now, and given that he's not, I can't bury my head in the sand. You know, there's risk with Bell. It's hard to imagine this doesn't wind up some kind of platoon, provided Joique Bell ever practices ever again. Now, off the top of the show, you heard me talk about my favorite sports app, which is Fanly. I really hope you'll consider giving it a try. I really do use it myself, and I find myself checking it multiple times a day. Rather than having to do all kinds of web searches or hitting a bunch of bookmarks, Fanly does what a sports app is supposed to do. It gives me everything that's going on with my favorite teams all in one place. You probably know that the big monolithic sports sites have apps that try and do the same sort of thing, but the problem is they kind of stink at it. They try and cram in so much, and it makes the app load really slowly. Things are hard to find, and basically I had to quit using them before I went insane. But Fanly has turned me around. It's really elegant. It loads fast. It works the way you want a sports app to work. And hey, if you've heard me talk about Fanly on an earlier show and you checked it out and liked it, tell a friend. Post it to Facebook or Twitter or Reddit, whatever. It helps the show, it helps Fanly, and most importantly, it helps fans. That's Fanly, Fanly. Now let's talk lottery tickets. As I mentioned, Brandon Funston will be on with several choices of later round players you can stash to begin the year, but I'll start with my list. You may remember that yesterday I talked post-hype sleepers, so I've already given you a description of Eric Ebron and Brian Quick. They probably both could fit into the lottery ticket category. Maybe Ebron a little bit more than Quick. Quick probably goes a little bit higher. So file them away for later rounds, but I probably don't need to hit them in depth again. I'm going to start off, therefore, with Brandon Coleman, Saints receiver, who apparently has pretty much locked up the number 3 receiving job in New Orleans behind Brandon Cooks and Marcus Colston. And yeah, you know, I have higher expectations for Cooks and Colston, but they'll cost more than Coleman. Apparently you have to have a C last name to start as a receiver in New Orleans this year. Coleman can be, you know, your last pick before grabbing a defense and a kicker. He's not an elite athlete in terms of quickness or short area explosiveness. In fact, you know, he might be a little bit of a lumberer, but you can't teach 6'6", and at 225 pounds, he runs a 4.56. That is Mike Evans territory. That's Vincent Jackson territory. Now, Coleman isn't the kind of athlete Evans or Jackson are. Those guys are, you know, really deadly when they have the ball in their hands, and I'm not sure Coleman will be. But if you're telling me, at minimum, Coleman has the Devery Henderson or Robert Meacham deep threat role for Drew Brees, but is way bigger than those guys and can be a red zone threat, there is some real lottery ticket appeal there. My next lottery ticket is Kyrie Robinson. I promise I'm not going all Saints on this list, but this is another one. Robinson, running back for New Orleans, got a lot of fantasy love last summer when Mark Ingram was just an oft-injured former Heisman winner, and there appeared to be work available for Robinson. But Ingram busted out last year, and now the Saints also have C.J. Spiller, which consigns Robinson to the bench for now. Still, not hard to imagine a scenario where Robinson could accrue some fantasy value. He's not a breakaway runner, but he's a tough guy. He's a banger who I personally think he can do what Ingram does, except maybe with slightly better vision. One complaint I've always had about Ingram is not positive what kind of vision he has as a runner. I think he leaves yards on the field. Now, it's obvious the Saints coaches don't agree with me because Robinson saw 76 carries last year, and most of those carries came in games when Ingram was injured, but that's instructive because Robinson became Sean Payton's go-to guy when Ingram was out. Kyrie is certainly going to need an Ingram injury, but if that happens, and Ingram has missed, I think it's 14 games in 4 years, Robinson will be the goal line back in New Orleans and a pretty nice fantasy play if Ingram wasn't playing. Next up for me is Vernon Davis. Big Vern, a year ago, went in the 5th round of 12-team drafts. He was the number 4 tight end overall. Now he's a 13th rounder, and he's the number 18 tight end. And listen, I'm not saying that ranking is wrong. I have real suspicions about Davis because on tape last year he looked slow and lethargic. But if his problems were all related to his contract holdout and conditioning and injuries, it's possible that he could rebound to dominant form in a 49ers offense that really needs him to do that. We're not talking about a spring chicken here anymore. He's 31, entering his 10th season in the NFL. Really, there's no guarantee his legs will come back. But I like the idea of taking a chance and, scooting him up your draft board a little bit to the very late rounds as a higher upside play than, guys who are likely to finish higher than him in total points but don't have the same kind of ceiling. Heath Miller, Larry Donnell, those kind of guys. 4th on this list is Matt Jones, running back in Washington. I am an Alfred Morris fan. I think Morris has some stuff about him, his qualities that kind of make him work well for fantasy. He's never really been hurt, never missed a game in his NFL career, though obviously that can change with one hit and certainly for running backs as their careers progress. And Morris is awfully steady. If you want to take a chance on a feast or famine kind of player, Morris is a good guy to pair him with because he'll usually get enough workload to give you something. That said, Morris is entering a contract year. He was inherited by Jay Gruden's staff, and he's had very big workloads the past 3 seasons. Enter the rookie, Matt Jones, who's finally a big backup who could actually do something real with the workload if Morris does go down. Jones looks, in the preseason, you always have to take it with a grain of salt, but he ran with the ones in Washington's most recent preseason game. To some degree, he looks quicker in an NFL uniform than I thought he would after his career at Florida. And he's 230 pounds. So, if there's some quickness in that big body, that's a pretty good sign. There's some electricity to this kid that should earn him playing time right away. He's going to play on some third downs and in some passing situations. Plus, he could spell Morris and, be a really good fill-in should Morris get hurt. Again, another guy. Lottery ticket. You can get him very late. And finally, Cody Latimer, the Broncos receiver. Denver doesn't have Wes Welker or Julius Thomas any longer, so someone's targets are going up. My guess initially is that maybe it won't be Latimer right away. Gary Kubiak is known to like 2 tight end sets. Owen Daniels and Virgil Green are going to play a bunch. But Peyton is obviously also going to want to go 3 wide some, especially when they go hurry up. And Latimer is the number 3 behind Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. So the practical side of me says, yeah, to start the year, it doesn't seem like the volume will be there for Latimer to be a fantasy starter. But I like him as a prospect. He's a 4.44 runner at 215 pounds, and he has crazy hops. I think he'll make a few plays in September that get fantasy owners' appetites going, and then, maybe we'll have to wait for a possible injury to the receiving core for him to really dig in as a startable option. But I like him in the 13th round of a 12-team draft. I say stash him for his upside and see how it goes.
Harris's Music Digression.
Today's digression comes from Summer Fiction, which is Bill Ricchini's current recording name. I absolutely loved his eponymous album from 4 years ago.
Eye roll.
Man, Amber. Getting feisty. Eponymous. Okay. Anyway, that's an amazing record I recommend you check out. And now Summer Fiction has a new one. The record is called Himalaya. And this is the first song on the new record. It's called On and On.
Time for the mailbag.
Christopher, Chris man, this is Paul. Can you bring back my electric trimmer? For the yard, my electric edger. It was used at Barton, wasn't it?
My wife and I saw Chris Harris at a nude beach. Believe me, the drapes match the carpet.
Hey man, I'm down here in Cincinnati, and last night I was out at Gurley's knee concert and couldn't help but notice Christopher wearing a trash bag, drinking booze, kept mumbling Bohemian Rhapsody. I tried to talk to him, but he tried to bite me, so I left him alone. That's all.
Lest you think I was exaggerating about the backlog of Christopher Harris sightings we have in voicemail form, there's just 3 of them, and that barely scratched the surface. I'm trying to get to him, folks, trying to get to him as best I can. We have an email from Robert Vieira, which continues one of the themes of the voicemails I just played. Apparently I am making the rounds with the band Gurley's Knee. You can follow them at Gurley's Knee. It's not a real band, people, but you should follow that account. Anyway, Robert Vieira writes, I spotted Christopher Harris at a bar in Athens, accompanied by the band Gurley's Knee, performing a rendition of the classic song Georgia on My Mind, in which he continually substituted the word Geordie for Georgia. He closed out the set, imploring the crowd to not be evil before walking off the stage and into the night. That's just it's so me, right? I have a non-joke tweet here from Brandon Ward, who asks, other than promoting the show, what can we do to help you with your venture behind the scenes? And my response to that, a lot of folks have asked similar questions. Thank you, Brandon, and everyone who is concerned about my livelihood, which I am too. The best thing you can do, honestly, subscribe and keep listening. Hey, patronize the advertisers. That's the best thing you can do, because they are my partners in this venture, and I believe in everyone who is going to be advertising on this show. I will not accept ads of any folks, any companies that I don't believe in, and so, I hope you'll patronize those businesses. not least because, they will know it, they will notice, and that will continue them advertising, and it will therefore keep the podcast free. So thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everybody.
Today's guest.
And today's guest is a dear old friend of mine, Brandon Funston from Yahoo Fantasy. Brandon is the gentleman who plucked me from obscurity. Was it like a decade ago, Brandon, when you took me under your wing and you brought me to Yahoo, and I promptly betrayed that trust and left for ESPN, and you've never forgiven me, and we're now going to reconcile our terribly tortured relationship. Am I right?
That's about right. It took you 1 year to realize you needed to get out of Dodge, get away from me. It's been almost another 10 years that I've worked on trying to forgive you. I think I'm close to that point. We can see if we can meet something out here and get back on aligning ourselves as friends.
Right.
Actually, Chris, it's been too long, my friend. It's good to be here, and I'm glad things are going well in the independent world for you.
Thank you very much. Of course, we're kidding. Brandon and I have been friends for since the very moment we started working together. And he lives in Seattle and I live on the East Coast, so we don't get to interact all that much. But this is a treat for me. He is a really, really smart guy. He's one of the true veterans in the industry. Brandon, just off the top, where should people be following you on Twitter? They should be following you.
Yeah, that's right. At 1BFun, BEFUN. That's where I'm at. So yeah, come follow.
You're a voice that people should be trusting. I trust your opinion on this stuff. And today we are talking about lottery tickets. It's a term that I know I throw out all the time. Say, hey, in the first 7 rounds, make sure you do that, this, and that. Don't take a defense. Don't take a kicker. And then, as you keep going, just take some lottery tickets. And then we go on to something else. And I think a lot of listeners then say, what? I should
right.
go, what? And so, what we're talking about when we talk about lottery tickets, as I've said earlier in the show, are late round guys with some upside. Maybe maybe they aren't ranked highest on your board of anyone who's available, but they've got more upside than other guys, often young players. If I were going to say who's your sort of poster child for lottery ticket circa 2015, could you isolate yourself on one player and say this would be my favorite lottery ticket?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if I could isolate on one.
Well, give me your best. Give me your first.
A guy I absolutely love, and I love the way that the preseason is playing out, is Duke Johnson in Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
Because he's been hurt, and it's almost been a good thing because it's allowed Isaiah Crowell and Terrence West to further flummox their coaching staff, draw the ire of those guys on a daily basis, and I think they really can't wait to get Duke Johnson in there and show what he can do. And a lot of comparisons were to Gio Bernard coming out of college when they drafted him, that he'll be their third down back. But I think he can be more than that, especially with the way Crowell and Terrence West have, underwhelmed to this point. And, you watch this guy, he's got really good vision, breakaway ability, and I can't say he could be the full-time feature guy. I think there's going to be a role for Crowell or West, one of those two guys, no matter what. But I think he's going to be maybe more than just a third down back there. And they have a good offensive line, so if he gets into that carry mix as well as, the safety valve for the quarterback, the check down guy there, I think he's got a lot of potential to be a guy that's going to flash some weeks and be at least serviceable on the other weeks. So he's a guy, and like I said, it's worked out well for him this preseason because he's been hidden by the injury. His draft value has gone way down because no one's talking about him, and that could change when he gets back this weekend. They're talking about trying to get him into the most important preseason game of the month coming up here this weekend. So if he has a big weekend, that could definitely change in a hurry.
Yeah, this is a strategy. Duke, don't play. It's better for your draft stock. You look so good by comparison just by not playing. So, in terms of average draft position in a 12-team league, Duke Johnson, we're looking at 10th round, 11th round. I think that
Sure.
absolutely qualifies as a lottery ticket. A player who, you can reach a little higher for. He's kind of a bright and shiny object in Cleveland. And I think you're right. That there's some appeal there only by comparison with the other guys.
But I can kind of sense you want me to go a little bit deeper.
Sure, give me a deeper name.
All right, let's go with Leonard Hankerson in Atlanta.
Love it.
you look at Atlanta's wide receiver fantasy points last year, second in the league. You got Roddy White, 34, coming off elbow surgery, getting his knee drained on a regular basis. You look at the elements of this Atlanta team. I know Dan Quinn comes in and he's the new head coach and he comes from Seattle. He's a defensive guy. Rome's not built in a day in terms of that defense. I think it's still going to be a bad defense. I think this is going to be an offense still going to struggle with two guys in Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman who have been injured most of preseason. And you're not talking about a running game that's suddenly going to turn into a dominating running game. So I think the elements of having to throw the ball a lot are still there. Roddy White could end up being a guy that misses half the season because of various injuries, and Leonard Hankerson's someone that they've been lauding. The coaching staff's been talking about this guy, how well he's been looking in preseason. Obviously, he comes over from Washington, where the quarterback situation was worlds below where it's at in Atlanta. So good size, 6'2". We've seen Harry Douglas a couple years ago when Julio Jones was out, put up 1,000 yards in this offense as someone who kind of ascended into a starting role there. So Leonard Hankerson's a guy that you could probably take him in the last round. I don't think anybody else is hunting him down. So someone to consider that could end up paying off.
He was a super deep sleeper of mine, like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I can't remember. The appeal with Hankerson for me is, you're right, he's got some height on him. He's not a sudden athlete by any stretch. So, ball in his hands in the open field, he's not going to make a lot happen. What he has is blistering speed. I mean, he is a really fast player. This is not people shouldn't be thinking this is Harry Douglas. This is not a slot player. This is a out wide player. And I think it's really interesting to think about what Kyle Shanahan wants to do with that offense, because we know that if he had his druthers, he would have a bell cow running back. He would have an Alfred Morris, right? He would run a zone blocking system. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a bell cow back. He doesn't really have a particularly good offensive line that's going to open huge lanes. What he's got is some aerial weapons. And, I mean, I'm sure you remember Pierre Garçon having a pretty darn good season with Kyle Shanahan as the offensive coordinator. We don't think Shanny Jr., we don't think he couldn't adjust himself to being more pass-focused here, right?
Oh, absolutely. And just to circle back on that backfield really quickly, who you taking? Who's your guy in that backfield? Because I've been a Freeman guy, and I argue with a lot of people who are Coleman guys, and it ultimately may not matter. It could just be a 50-50 split, but I'm just curious where you're landing on that.
Well, I want Coleman to win the job, because I feel like I know what Freeman is, and it's fine. It's a good NFL player, but it's not a fantasy star. I don't see Freeman ever really being a fantasy star. However, I think he probably has the safer downside. We really have no idea what Coleman is. Coleman, despite the big production at Indiana, wasn't a favored prospect of mine. He's a sprinter who's not physical and doesn't have great vision. That doesn't sound like
absolutely.
An NFL star.
I agree with that assessment wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So I mean, it probably does work out as a platoon. I wish Coleman would win the job, but I mean, considering they've both been hobbling around on bad hamstrings for like a month, probably it's going to be Anton Smith, and we'll all be sad. You were talking to me about the Washington tight end situation and maybe looking for a sleeper behind Jordan Reed. Now we would start getting really deep, like maybe not even a 12-team league, maybe a 16-team. But I like this idea that a player is going to get hurt, and finding someone behind him. Who do you have your eye on in Washington?
And really, we've talked about 12-team sleepers ad nauseum at this point, right? We're to the point that we need to get beyond that. I think a little bit as we get deeper into this preseason. And
that's why we call them lottery tickets, right?
That's right. Derek Carrier is a guy who is an absolute physical specimen, and kind of one of those combine freaks who the Redskins brought over, made a trade with the 49ers to back up Jordan Reed, because they absolutely have to back that guy up. With Niles Paul gone, Jordan Reed's got a hamstring issue right now. It's kind of been the story of his career. Concussions go into the mix as well. So, but this Washington Redskins team, I mean, they had 102 total catches at the tight end position last year. You look at their quarterback situation. I think every one of those guys is,
they need a safety valve, is what you're saying.
They need a safety valve, absolutely. And I love Jordan Reed. If you told me Jordan Reed was going to play 16 games, I might put him in my top 5. I mean, he's that kind of guy in terms of, he had put up some huge yardage games, oddly enough, they had 102 catches at the tight end position. They only had 2 touchdowns, which is, to me, is sort of an anomaly. But but Derek Carrier, 6'4", great speed. So he's the kind of guy that could come out of nowhere, and we've seen that happen with the Redskins tight ends. Niles Paul put up some big numbers when he was a man last year as well. So that position just interests me. Whoever's the number one guy there, I think that's a fairly lucrative tight end spot in fantasy.
I like it, and plus, that the NFL team that just acquired him, traded for him. They sought him out. Right.
Absolutely.
They sought him out as, okay, we've lost Logan Paulson and Niles Paul. We need depth. Let's look around the league and give up something for a guy, and this is the guy they picked. I think that's a really smart lottery ticket, and maybe not a 12-team league, but maybe a 16-team league. I'm really digging it. I think he wasn't even on my radar screen until we just started talking, but thinking about what I know about him, the Spark fanatics loving him so much from the Combine, I think that's a great one.
Yeah, and his old team, the 49ers, I know you're a Vernon Davis. You're talking about Vernon Davis. What's your, I didn't get a chance to hear it, but what's your position on him this year?
I think he's probably being drafted fairly. That's what I kind of tried to impart. It's just that last year he was a top 5 tight end, and this year he's number 18 being drafted. And so, if you were ever in a 12-team league just sitting around and you're in the 13th round and you already have your starting tight end, I don't mind taking Dave. He's 31.
A guy that the year before that had 13 touchdowns. Right. The thing with me that's very interesting about San Francisco is, everybody came out of last year wanting to quit. And I think they had 3 or 4 premature retirements.
Sure.
And you could say that Vernon Davis quit. He just, didn't make it official.
Just kept playing, right? He just kept taking paychecks, yeah.
So, I think the Harbaugh, the burn of Harbaugh there, I think started to get on people. It was time for a reset button push. And, maybe that was a big part of the Vernon Davis issue there. So I think, as an 18th tight end and average draft picks, he's probably, I think that's way more than fair and a great lottery ticket. We know what his upside is, and he's been in the top 5 plenty of times in the past. So, I'd definitely be intrigued by that. And of course, the 49ers offense is going to be a little less conservative this year, for sure. So, could work out well.
Yeah. So I was trying to come up with a lottery ticket from the Colts receiving core, because that's not a bad receiving core to be thinking about. And the reason I got stymied was I couldn't pick just one guy. They have a couple of young guys who are some really interesting depth, and I don't know which one to pick. For me, it would come down to Dante Moncrief, who flashed very occasionally last year, but had a hard time getting past Hakeem Nicks on the depth chart, which that's not a good sign. And then the guy I think you're going to talk about, the rookie Philip Dorsett, who is a first-round pick and kind of a T.Y. Hilton clone. Right. You prefer Dorsett as the lottery ticket.
I do, just because he's getting a lot of good buzz there. I mean, they're talking about how it's hard to follow this guy on the field. He's so fast. I think the deal here is I feel like Dante Moncrief. I was on that train a little bit last year too. Yeah. I feel like if there was opportunities there for him to grab, and it's kind of like it just hasn't happened, and they go out and they get Dorsett, and I feel like if they were absolutely lock solid with Moncrief, that maybe they're not reaching out for Dorsett so early, and so to me it sounds like Dorsett's going to be the guy they're going to have a hard time getting off the field just because of the element that he brings with his speed. And
do you have concern, though, that if your 3 receiver set, okay, so Andre Johnson for some size, but your 3 receiver set has 2 similar little fast guys who kind of have a hard time going over the middle of the field? That's where it's not that I disagree with you on Dorsett, but where I get tripped up is Hilton and Dorsett kind of being clones.
Right. Well, I think so. The deal here is, I think Dorsett's the kind of lottery ticket you take hoping for an injury. Okay. And it's kind of like with Hankerson. If Roddy White plays 16 games, Leonard Hankerson's not going to do a whole lot. Let's be obvious. So you got Andre Johnson, who once upon a time, was a annual injury risk guy, and
sure.
And so there's that. But it's probably an offense that I think is going to end up leading the league in scoring, and so I think even if there's not an injury, if there's a dedicated third guy, I think that he's a viable fantasy option. But you're right. There's a lot of similarities to T.Y. Hilton. But I think you got Andre Johnson's a big guy, and you got Dwayne Allen's a big guy. If you need to, mix that around, you can do that. But I think you'll talk to a lot of offensive coordinators who say there's never enough speed on the field. I mean, it'll take more and more and more. So, I think they can be, I think they can get creative, to use his speed if they have to, go the Percy Harvin routes where they, move him around, or Brandon Cooks, where you're kind of taking the guy with the sudden speed and trying to find ways to get him the ball in space.
Right.
I think that's a possibility, but I just like the offense. I like the skills, and sometimes you just have to have faith that it'll work itself out.
That's the way I think about it. I mean, I guess I learned from the best, because that is the way I think about it. I think, for all I'm saying, gosh, duplication of effort with Hilton, we don't know what's going to happen. I think the right way to think about it is draft super talented players with high upsides. Don't worry so much about depth charts, because depth charts change so much. So I think
absolutely,
there's something to be said for that. Any other sort of lottery ticket guys who you had on your list who we haven't hit on at this point?
I will throw out Chris Polk, because I think Alfred Blue's just a guy. I think Chris Polk is, sort of just a guy, but he's maybe a little bit better than that. We'll have to wait and see where Arian Foster's at. But if he's a 6 to 8 game out kind of guy, I ultimately think that Chris Polk can beat out Alfred Blue. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded. I think he's a poor man's Arian Foster in his skill set. He can catch the ball. He's got similar kind of style to his running, and I think he can be strong at the goal line. And so if you're just, if you're the guy that already drafted Arian Foster, and I am one who in an auction league liked the value on Arian Foster where he was at. I certainly wasn't seeking him out, but ended up taking him, and I did not grab Alfred Blue at the time. And so if you're an Arian Foster owner sitting there and somebody else is owning Alfred Blue and Chris Polk is kind of just swimming in the waiver pool there, I would go out and grab Chris Polk, because I think he could ultimately end up being more valuable than Alfred Blue while Arian Foster's out.
So this has nothing to do with the Pacific Northwest bias, I'm sure.
No, absolutely not. Hey, the thing is, they sought out Chris Polk. They saw him in Philadelphia last year, and they went out and they wanted to grab him. And I think he's kind of, he had a good preseason outing his last time out. And if he has another one, I think we're going to hear a lot more about him before the season starts.
I'm just talking UW, man. I'm just thinking.
I know. I'm not. You're not going to hear me talk about Bishop Sankey a whole lot, even though he had a nice preseason game last time out as well. But I don't really think the Tennessee backfield matters a whole lot for for our purposes.
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. I know you're able to be objective despite the Pacific Northwest loyalty that I know you have.
That's right. Of course, don't look at my overall rankings. That has Marshawn Lynch number 1 right now, but I saw you had him number 2, so I don't feel so far out of whack there.
I do, and I had him number 1 until Le'Veon Bell's suspension got reduced to 2 games. I had him number 1. So
yeah, well, it's and I've never had him number 1 before, but I look
Me
at.
neither.
But, so much about drafting, one of those top picks is just not absolutely whiffing on it. And and so to me, it's all about who I think has the highest floor, who's the safest. I know he's old, but he didn't have any signs of slowing down last year, and he doesn't miss games. And so if I look at all the 5 or 6 running backs that you might consider at the top pick, I really think Marshawn Lynch has the best chance to at least be in the top 5 running backs at the end of the season. That's all I really want. I don't need to have a number 1 overall guy. I just need to have someone that I know won't finish out of that top 5.
Well, we've diverted off. This will be the last question. I'll let you go after this. But while we've diverted off into the top 5 questions, people on this podcast are getting a little tired of me saying that Matt Forte belongs in that group. Now, I'm not saying he needs to be number 3. I'm not saying he needs to be number 4. But I think he belongs in the top 6. And I know a lot of folks. I think I might be the only. Tell me I'm the only person that thinks this. But what about Forte for you?
Oh man, I'm sorry. This is we're gonna have to diverge here a little bit.
He scares you.
He scares me. I mean, the fact that this is going to be a more of a run-oriented offense.
You wouldn't want the running back in a run-oriented offense. That would be a disaster.
Well, the problem is you look at Trestman, and what did he average? 80-some catches in this couple of years that he was there. And if you go back, before Trestman, he was averaging like 40, 50 catches, even though he's always been a great receiver. He's if you take that element away from him significantly, I think you look at the change from Trestman to John Fox, there's going to be probably a big jump down in the receptions area. But he averaged 3.9 yards per carry behind the offensive line. It's not that good, and if I'm looking at the guys in the first round running backs that you can make arguments against them. Like I feel like Forte has the most check boxes in that situation. It's kind of more the team environment around him, and sure there's some mileage on him as well. I just loved him in Trestman's system where he's catching 80 to 100 balls there. It just makes it such a safety net for his fantasy value.
Yeah. Well, he's a flag player of mine, so I'll get to be
give me the counter. What do you love about him?
I just think he's extraordinarily talented. He's 1,800 yards in back-to-back seasons. Yes, of course he's not catching 100 balls, but 50 or 60 is absolutely in play. And if you're telling me that the drawback is that, darn, they're going to run more, there's no one else there who's going to run. I think he's as safe as anyone. Not that safe because no one's that safe in that group. Lynch might be the safest. Actually, sure. Bell is probably the safest if you get rid of those first 2 days. But the boxes that I check off about Adrian Peterson and Eddie Lacy, especially without Jordy Nelson now, and Jamal Charles with his volume, and I feel like whatever demerit I give to the others, I can sort of also give them to Forte. I just think he's in the same conversation. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, fair enough.
We'll see how it goes. Brandon, you're a really good person to have on podcast, it turns out, after we just did this. I just decided.
Well, I am around, and if we want to keep this rolling throughout the year, I'll be happy to do it. It's a good chance for me to catch up with somebody that I enjoy talking to and don't get to talk to enough.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing it again. I think you probably could tell from that conversation that Brandon is really, really good at this stuff, has been doing it for a long time. You should follow him on Twitter at @1BeFun.
BEFUN. There it is. Yeah.
#1BEFUN. I hope you'll follow him. Look for his takes on Yahoo. He's a great guy. He's a great fantasy analyst, and he's a better guy. Brandon, thanks for doing this.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thanks a lot, man.
And that's our show. Thank you again so much to Bill from Summer Fiction. I am a huge fan of that band. I really recommend you check out their first record, and this most recent second record is great as well. Coming up on tomorrow's show, Mike Clay from Pro Football Focus will be back, and we're going to talk busts for 2015, so you won't want to miss that show. I hope you'll consider subscribing to the podcast. It helps us out. Regardless, I'm very appreciative that you're listening. Thanks so much. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The end theme is Tooth and Claw by OU Villain. Subscribe to the Harris Football Podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.